A film by Akim Galimov. Director Daria Saricheva. Operator Markian Kanyukov. Co-author Ruslan Sharipov. Subtitle editor Oksana Ivanchenko. Executive producer Volodymr Andriyuk. General producers Victoria Lezina and Alexander Tkachenko. Ukraine, returning our history. Last year, we discovered one of the most secret pages of Ukrainian history. Who was the wife of Yaroslav the Wise, Swedish princess in her head? Our team recreated her face based on the form of her skull, but that was just the beginning of returning our history. At that time, we discovered another mystery. The famous image of Yaroslav the Wise's face is untrue. It was created in the USSR times with the ideological purpose to putting other histories in our minds. We promised that we, by any means, recreate the true face of the great prince. But it turned out that his remains disappeared from the tomb in the city center. We spent a year searching. We checked dozens of theories. We've been looking in Ukraine, Russia, and the US. During the investigation, we discovered new details to prove that the reconstruction of Yaroslav's face is false. Our children study history written by others. But the search didn't bring any results, and we gave up. When I was driving to meet this woman, I had no idea she'd prompt us to renew the investigation. Yaroslav the Wise founded one of the most prominent dynasties in Europe. His descendants ruled the lands which today belong to 10 countries. This is the history of the vast empire. They fought wars, built temples, and founded cities. They created our state. It was called Rus.
Today it's called Ukraine.
But where are their burials? These bones were taken from the sarcophagus and taken away. And these people disappear. All the bodies, bones, tombs.
They hunt after these skulls.
Why did their chronicles disappear, and all the connections with our land were lost? It was done on purpose. You have the source, you have history. No source, no history. How to find out the truth about our roots if there is nothing left?
We have to work together to solve this mystery.
We'll be looking for the remains of the descendants of Yaroslav the Wise. And why did they want to close access? I assume to cover up something. Someone will outspace us all the time to hide the evidence. The head of this organization is no other than... Will we win this battle? We'll shoot each other, blow up something, throw bombs. Who are the people whose remains will be our last chance to find out the truth? What will the DNA test in the Danish laboratory show? These results contradict historical data collected by archaeologists, anthropologists, and historians. Why did the agreements between the Pope and the son of Yaroslav the Wise were hidden? Will we be able to decipher them in the secret Vatican archives? The team of the best historians, archaeologists, anthropologists, and forensics will join forces again to return our history and recreate the face of the dynasty founder, Yaroslav the Wise. The public interest in him is very high. We will be able to see this person, his image. History is a huge mosaic made of thousands of tiny pieces. When you put them together, you'll get the wholesome picture. Kyiv. It all began from this meeting in a Kyiv cafe. Svetlana Rinchenko called and told me that her father was an archaeologist, arrested 85 years ago. She brought the most valuable family heirloom, an album with her father's discoveries. She never saw him.
I was 4 months old when they took my father away from me. I don't want to say repressed. It is a difficult word. This relic, his album, has been left in our family. It was a miracle it survived. When they searched our house during the arrest in 1938, they took all the papers and documents. But this folder accidentally fell behind the sofa. It is a miracle.
Imagine how it feels. 80 years creating the image of the beloved person by the way he laughed and spoke, what he was, only having a few black and white photos.
This is his heritage. You see, I grew up with this album.
If it weren't for this album, no one would ever know about this archaeologist's find. At the end of the 1920s, during Dniepro's construction near Zaporizhia, he found 4 swords from the 10th century. It's still considered the most significant discovery of the Kyivan Rus weapon on Ukrainian territory. Where are these swords now?
I don't know what happened to them.
So the fate of these finds is unknown.
It is unknown.
Svetlana Rinchenko told this story because she saw the news on TV about smugglers detained on the Russian-Estonian border. They tried to smuggle the ancient sword from Ukraine. What do you want to find out?
I would like to know if they've found this sword from my father's collection, from the album. It's our family story, you see. All my life, I lived with the memory of my father. I want his name to stay in history. He wrote a testament for me.
What do you tell her? Today on her birthday, to my beloved dear, to my unknown daughter, my vision, to my baby, a true saint. Will you ever understand the depth of my suffering with your young innocent soul? My fatherly love and torments of my soul. Maybe at least for a moment you will live by me. They separated us, forever or temporarily. Only fate will tell. The only thing I beg you, don't lose the name of a human being along the road of life. I was only 4 months old when I lost my father, but I kept my love for him all my life.
I would like to finish his work.
Svetlana Rinchenko is in her 80s, but she doesn't give up. After this meeting, we realized that we could not give up. We will help her return the story of her father, and we will try to return the history of our country and recreate the face of Yaroslav the Wise. First, we will start with people who know everything about facial images. Last year, they helped us recreate a destroyed portrait of Ivan Mazepa. Andrei Perehidenko is a forensic expert at Ministry of Interior, and Yuri Shatailo is a nut expert. We have a massive problem with the skull of Yaroslav the Wise. It's gone, and it is now quite challenging to recreate his appearance. We don't have any plan B. We can try to recreate his face based on the images of his descendants, comparing them. We will show you an example. In the British royal family, all the relatives have common features in their appearance: father's eyes, mother's nose, etc. With this methodology, we can try to recreate Yaroslav's face. Look, we have a grandfather, a father, and 2 sons. I see. All these people have similar noses with the outline of the nose bridge and nostrils. Do they have only similar noses? No, there are other recurring features. The same lip contour and chin line. As you can see, they all have the same. Well, I see, but it sounds like sci-fi when you say we can take relatives' features and create another person. No, it's a well-known method since the dawn of forensic science, since the time of Bertillon, who measured all face parts. We can still use this method. The main problem is to find authentic images of Yaroslav descendants. Forensic expert suggests the unimaginable, to find the remains of great prince's children, grandchildren, or other close relatives and recreate their faces based on their skulls. Selecting common features, we can reconstruct Yaroslav's appearance. So we have to find their graves. We split. I go to the National Sanctuary Sofia of Kyiv to find materials about the face recreation of Yaroslav the Wise. Ruslan goes to the Archaeology Institute to look through all the digging documentations of princely burials on Ukrainian territory. In the last century, the sarcophagus of Yaroslav the Wise was opened a few times. For the last time, the bones of the great prince were seen in 1939, when scholars sent them to Leningrad for research. Famous Soviet anthropologist Mikhail Gerasimov worked with them at the time and recreated Yaroslav's face. According to the documents, the remains were returned to Kyiv, but today there's only this bust in St. Sophia. In the archives of St. Sophia, I found the photo negatives of Yaroslav's skull and his anthropological measurements. This information might help the forensic experts to recreate the face. In the archives, Ruslan found archaeological reports from the digs at the prince's burials. There were 5 such places: Volodymr Volynskiy, Lutsk, Pereyaslav, Chernihiv and Vasiliev. Our investigation plan is to check every one of them. Volodymr Volynskiy is the first on our list. The temple in the city center was built during Kyivan Rus times. All local historians and priests are confident that the direct descendants of Yaroslav the Wise are buried in the church. Here, 130 years ago, a Russian archaeologist Adrian Prakhov found a tomb with princely remains. Our task is to follow the scholar's steps, discover the tomb and research the bones. We contacted a local historian, Volodymyr Pikaluk, and asked him to help in our search. As far as I understand, you were able to find the entrance to the dungeon. Yes, it is located here, in the old boiler house. There are passages from here to Assumption Cathedral. So they are underground, yes. Unfortunately, after Prakhov's expedition, no plans or drawings have been left regarding the tomb of Volodymyr Vasilkovich. Through this tunnel, warm air was getting to the Assumption Cathedral. It is dark and damp. Can we reach the tomb we're looking for through this passage? Let's hope so. Have you ever been here yourself? I think this is the first time. Only last week we found out that it is functioning and accessible. Let's open it and see where it leads us. Let's try to get through. I'll be the first and you'll follow me. The tradition to bury nobility in the dungeons of the temple stopped hundreds of years ago. There could be dangerous bacteria from the decomposition of the bodies in the air. It is not safe to stay here for more than a few minutes. We don't have much time to find the entrance to the dungeon. Why are there no other entrances? I guess during the last restoration, all the entrances were filled with concrete to limit access to the dungeon. Why did they want to close access? I assume to cover up something. The tomb with the remains we are looking for in the dungeon contains the remains of Prince Volodymyr Vasilkovich. He was born almost 200 years ago after the death of Yaroslav the Wise, but he looked very much like him. Like Yaroslav, Volodymyr Vasilkovich made his lands into one of the influential European centers. He didn't invest all his money in his palace decorations, but in the education of the common people. He built libraries and financed the writing of the chronicles. I don't know if we will be able to get there. These bricks are new, maybe from the 19th century. I think the entrances were walled up during the restoration of the cathedral. We see that we cannot get in there today. Only a tiny animal can get in there. The hole is just enough to feed the pipe. Are there other options to get in? We should start searching in the cathedral. The burial could be under a concrete floor due to the reconstruction at the end of the 19th century. To find the tomb with the prince's remains, we called for a team of experts in architecture, archaeology and anthropology. It will be the first large-scale research on the cathedral in the last 130 years. This may be the last remaining tomb from the Kyivan Rus times.
Learning the history of our people, knowing our ancestors, our people, and our elites is crucial for our self-identification. Our textbooks have to pass on this knowledge.
Expert team meets to find the exact site to start searching. Researchers focus on the particular niches in the walls of the cathedral. Burial chambers could be underneath. As a rule, people were buried with their heads backward, and Prachov could find something in this wall, but we need to check both. First, we'll scan these niches. You mean these consoles? Yes. Then we'll look at this quadrant and the other one. If we find the remains, this will change the course of our investigation. We begin from the first niche. There is a contemporary inscription that this is the burial of Volodymr Vasilkovich's ashes. Scanning the first profile. Georadar penetrates the floor to 2 meters. Every young and experienced scientist wants to solve this mystery. We've passed the first niche. Everything is clear. Scientists move on to the next.
We expect to find a cavity with the bones. If we have a skull, we can assume that this is Prince Volodymr Vasilkovich.
Volodymr Vasilkovich was known to be tall, broad-shouldered, with a handsome face and curly hair. There were no equals to the prince in beauty, but his fate was tragic. He got sick. Chronicle says that his lower jaw started to rot.
This could be cancer, or maybe even syphilis, or another infectious disease. We cannot guess now. We need to see the bone, or even better, make a DNA analysis of the bacteria which may have stayed there.
We can only imagine how the prince, who got used to being the center of attention and attracted women, had to hide his beauty. He rarely appeared in public. In those times, people perceived disease as God's punishment. They believed a physical impairment resulted from the sinfulness of the affected person or the parents. Despite bad health, he still helped people and gave money to those in need. He even gave away his most valued thing, his grandmother's necklace. We know these details from the Halician-Volhynian Chronicle, one of the primary historical sources for the history of Kyivan Rus. It was created at the court of Volodymr Vasilkovich. At those times, it meant that he was the actual author. His life ended tragically. No doctor could cure his jaw disease, and the prince died in excruciating pain. The Chronicle says that everyone cried for him. The traces of disease on the bones could help us identify the prince's remains. At last, in the third niche, Georadar detects the object, which could be a burial chamber. We'll see some lines here. We have 2 prints, 40 and 24 centimeters. It's an anomaly. Could that be a burial chamber from Prachov's report? I don't have information about the historical past of these walls, but I see these spots. We've marked them in red. These are the imprints of these anomalies. There's something here, yes. Meanwhile, in our lab, Ruslan found new evidence of the falsification of Yaroslav's image in the materials of the Ukrainian scientist Oleg Sapovstenko, who worked in St. Sophia of Kiev in the 1940s. He argued that Mikhail Gerasimov, who created the image, used not only anthropological measures of the skull, but a fresco depicting the father of Alexander Nevsky, one of the most respected Russian rulers. Ruslan found the image of the fresco. It is painted in one of the cathedrals of the Russian Novgorod. Unbelievable. Main features of the two faces, eyes, nose, beard, are similar like two drops of water. Why did Gerasimov choose this person to recreate the image of Yaroslav the Wise? Two possible answers are either ideological guidelines or the author's historical incompetence. Gerasimov's work is now criticized in Russia as well. For example, his recreation of the face of Prince Andrei Boholutsky, made by this anthropologist, is also being doubted. New methods showed significant differences between Gerasimov's work and recent findings. In Volodymr Volynski, we're trying to understand if the underground cavity seen by Georadar is the prince's tomb. Archaeologist Yuri Lukomsky suggests studying this zone using an inspection camera from outside. There is a ventilation hole, probably connected to the burial chamber. We have the picture. Yes. See if there is something further. It turns left, and then we don't see anything. Does it turn left? Yes, to the left. Left. It turns a little bit to the left. Georadar showed the same thing. The outline of the vent hole is consistent with the cavities seen by radar, meaning there is no burial chamber at this site. It is probably ruined. The question is, where did this box go? We've never localized it. Prachov could have reburied these ashes in another place. Why would you rebury in the same cathedral from one place to another? I don't understand this either. The burial place was marked in the report. The disappearance of Prince's grave in Volodymr Volynski repeats the disappearance pattern of the remains belonging to Yaroslav the Wise from the marble sarcophagus in Sofia of Kyiv. The only thing we found out is that the old reports about the first cathedral research went to the collection of the St. Volodymyr's Orthodox Brotherhood. This local organization financed the digging and was dissolved 100 years ago without any trace. We need more information about the relatives of Yaroslav the Wise. Forensics asked to collect the evidence about his parents, as they have to consider regional specifics while recreating his face. Yaroslav's mother is known to be born in Polotsk, in contemporary Belarus. But we don't have reliable information about the father, Volodymr the Great, Baptist of Rus. In Kyiv, Ruslan contacted a historian, Dmytro Gordienko. He appointed the meeting in the Department of Rare Publications of the Vernadsky Library. He points out that the ancient texts about the birth of the Baptist of Kyiv Rus disappeared. As of today, these sources are out of reach. What were you able to find? We have a fascinating document, a complete collection of the laws of the Russian Empire. These are official texts and documents. Here is the order of Emperor Peter I, dated by December 20, 1720. This order clearly states the great emperor ordered that all the monasteries in the Russian Empire have to review and submit all the ancient charters and other curious original letters, books, historical manuscripts, and printed documents, whatever they can find. So we have a direct emperor's order to collect and confiscate the books. The law was valid until the last days of Russian Empire. Where did they take those books? Mostly to the Synodal Library, which means they would be under complete control of Holy Synod, who couldn't leak any information from these documents. Synodal Library in Moscow is the leading book depository of the Russian Orthodox Church, founded in the 16th century. Dmytro Gordienko says that after the chronicles were taken out of Ukraine, Russia suddenly became Volodymyr's birthplace. It is clearly stated that he was born in Budyatin, a village near Pskov, from Malusha Olga's housekeeper, as a third son of the great Prince Svetoslav. He was named Volodymr. This means that Catherine appointed Volodymyr's birthplace near Pskov Russia. Yes, and even the village is mentioned. It is clearly a falsification. Moreover, conducted with Empress's support. It wasn't allowed even to question this statement. As of today, there is no single documentary evidence that Volodymr was born in Russian Pskov. But after 200 years of active propaganda, first in books and now also on TV, there is no doubt that Yaroslav's father was born somewhere else. It is of utmost importance for our investigation to find out the truth. The final image depends on it. The only clue we have is in St. Sophia of Kyiv. The burial sarcophagus of the Baptist is here. I'm meeting the historian Vyacheslav Kornienko to find out if there are any remains inside. There is nothing inside. It is just an ordinary museum artifact. Did they disappear? Yes. In 1940, the skull was sent to Leningrad, to Gerasimov's laboratory, where they planned to recreate Volodymyr's face the way they did this before with Yaroslav's face. And what happened next? Next, the skull disappeared. It was in Leningrad. We don't have any information about where it is now. When you start researching these questions, you realize it was done on purpose. Gerasimov worked in a well-guarded forensics laboratory. Yaroslav the Wise, Prince Vasilkovich of Volhynia, and now Volodymr the Great. The remains of the key people in our ancient history disappeared, and this doesn't look like a coincidence. We need to establish the origins of Volodymr the Great. Without historical sources and a skull, it is almost impossible. We thought of letting this go, but local historians from the small village of Budyatichi on Volhynia contacted us. Having heard about our research from their colleagues, they invited us to come. According to them, Volodymr the Great was born there. I want to check this hypothesis and go there to meet historian Olena Leshko. She arranged a meeting in a strange place.
This place is unique. The chambers of the mother of Volodymr the Great stood on the spot. Prince Volodymr was born in this place. He lived here when he was young. Maybe he was even running around barefoot.
This theory is based on the legends which have been told here from generation to generation for several centuries. For instance, when a young Baptist learned to fight with a sword with the help of his father's men. Young princes learned to be men from early childhood, when they were 10 or 11 years old. We know that the prince took his sword at this age and tried to fight with it. Do you believe in this theory?
First of all, this is a hypothesis. We don't have any substantial evidence. As a historian, I should be critical about it. Of course, I would like this place to be his birthplace, but I am sure that he was not born in Russia. For sure, he originated from Ukraine.
We didn't find reliable proof of Volodymyr's birth in Budyatichi and continued our search in Lviv. Here we have some of the oldest museums and archives in Ukraine. During the investigation, we contacted local historian Yuri Dyba. We met near the Depository of the Lviv Historical Museum. The researcher says that for 80 years they had the artifact here, which will finally prove where the Baptist of Rus was born. Here it is. This is a unique artifact. It is a skull pierced with a forged metal nail. A real nail, and where is it? I can see. The skull is filled with soil. This hole in the soil is where the nail was. And this nail was hammered into the head. Yes, we see the tip of the nail from beneath. It was hammered into the skull crown. Under the pressure, the nail broke. Apparently, pagans might do that to execute Christians. There are testimonies that Rus warriors killed priests this way. Priests? It is probably connected with the central Christian thesis, a resurrection. The priests were preaching this, and perhaps to prevent the resurrection of the priests, pagans might kill them in this way. They believed that the priest could rise from the grave. Yes, apparently yes. Inside and outside Volodymyr's city walls, dozens of such skulls were found. Only around Volodymyr Volynski, around Volodymyr and in the nearest vicinity. But this is a unique situation because this is not found anywhere else on the Rus territory. These are the events of the pagan era before Volodymyr officially baptized the country in 988. In the later times, we can find other cases of confrontation between pagans and Christianity. I think Sviatoslav's pagan entourage did this. Without his direct order, such things couldn't happen. He was, so to say, the leader of this pagan party in Rus. Yuri Dyba suggests a bold theory. Volodymyr Volynski, the city and the vicinity, was Sviatoslav's territory, the father of Volodymyr the Great, while according to the official version, Sviatoslav ruled in Russian Novgorod. Russian historiography says so. We don't have any foundations for that, because Russian Novgorod didn't exist at the time. Some fascinating artifacts were discovered in Volodymyr Volynski, ceramics branded with Tudent. Not Volodymyr's trident, but Sviatoslav's Tudent. We've seen such branding nowhere else, and it is the evidence that this territory was Sviatoslav's domain. The skull shows that the future saint and Baptist of Rus was born in Budyatichi, near Volodymyr. This village is mentioned in the chronicles as Budyatinaves, where Princess Olha sent Volodymyr's pregnant mother, Malusha. It happened around 962 in times of the pagan reaction. So this skull is the first link to another story. You take away Kyiv Rus history from Russia, and their roots and origins vanish. We know from historical sources that Volodymyr the Great grew up among pagans. Yuri Dyba says that the last proof of Volodymyr's birthplace in Volhynia is a legend of the ancient Kisil family. We want to check it. And I go to the church built by Adam Kisil, one of the most famous members of this family. Ruslan goes to historical archive in Kyiv. We need to find Kirill's coat of arms. They owned the land near Budyatichi for centuries. They believe their ancestor was a pagan Viking from Sviatoslav's entourage. If we prove this legend, it means that Volodymyr the Great could have been born in Volhynia. We can do this if we study their coat of arms, which usually contains information about the family's origins. I found it in Kisil's family crypt. In the archive, Ruslan finds and studies even older signs. We have Kisil's emblems from different epochs. We compared them and got extraordinary results. If we remove layers of later decorations, we have one sign in the core, a Scandinavian rune Ir. It proves that the founder of this family could be a pagan Viking from Sviatoslav's court. The Volhynia theory of Volodymyr's birth got another confirmation. We passed this information on to the forensics and continued searching for Yaroslav's descendants. Chernihiv is the second city in our investigation plan. In the 1950s, a famous Soviet archaeologist Boris Rybakov worked here. The scale of his expedition is impressive. Almost 10 years of ongoing archaeological excavations. Archaeological expeditions are costly. They need equipment, money and people. Such resources are only available for Moscow institutions. Only they could allow such grand research. In Chernihiv, I met a local historian, Volodymyr Pilipenko. I want to know what was so big here for the Moscow archaeologist to look for. Volodymyr, hi. Hello. I have several photographs from archives of the Archaeology Institute. Do you know anything about these excavations? Professor Rybakov was digging in the Annunciation Cathedral, built on the Chernihiv city wall at the end of the 12th century. This photo shows the river view. Here, yes. Let's look at the map. I have the old map here of the Chernihiv outline. We're here now, on the border of the old town. The old church was standing on the city wall. I think this is what we are looking for. We can now see the place of the old digging. It isn't far from here. Let's see. Professor Rybakov found 7 graves. He identified one as a burial of a Prince Vsevolod Sviatoslavovich Buytur. Who was this prince? This was the direct descendant of Yaroslav the Wise, his grandson and the hero of the tale of Ihor's campaign. He lived in Chernihiv for some time and could be buried in Annunciation Cathedral. I think he fits our investigation. Where can we see his remains? Unfortunately, we cannot do this in Ukraine. They took everything away to Moscow. All the bones from all the 7 graves, all bodies, bones, tombs, and personal belongings. They took absolutely everything. Why would they need the bones? Ideology is the reason. Who controls history controls modernity. The state was taking care of it. Based on the skull, you can reconstruct the face. Then you can show his face to children from young age and tell them that it is a great Russian prince. The Russian state and Russian history. All these are links of one chain. It is a colossal state imperial ideology. Volodymr Pilepenko's story confirms that the image of Yaroslav the Wise was created for propaganda reasons and that princely remains disappeared on purpose. We are at Professor Rybakov's excavation location. The photo clearly shows that that's still here now. Unfortunately, the church is gone. We wanted to cross out Chernihiv from our search plan, but we got information about another tomb, which was discovered accidentally after the excavations of the Moscow archaeologists. In 1967, the constructors found a stone sarcophagus with human remains during the repair work. Today it is in Boris-and-Gleb Cathedral. But where are the bones? And who was buried there? To find this out, I met with archaeologist Oleg Vasuta. Hi. Good afternoon. Take a seat. Were you able to identify the remains? The burial was found beyond the Savior Cathedral. The prince's family members were buried inside the temple as a rule. But in the 11th century, in 1078 to be exact, there was a note that Gleb Sviatoslavovich, murdered in the north, was buried beyond the Savior Cathedral. It might be his grave. He was the grandson of Yaroslav the Wise. His grandson? Yes, grandson. There was a skull. I can't believe we finally got closer to our aim and found the remains of one of the closest relatives of Yaroslav the Wise. Here it is. May I see? When you say it is Yaroslav's grandson, I have a special feeling about this skull. This man lived 1,000 years ago. He witnessed the Kyiv state at its peak. But what kind of person was he? What did he look like? It was a popular thing to order miniatures of family portraits in medieval Europe. It is similar to modern photo shoots. One of such miniatures, made in the times of Yaroslav the Wise, is a picture of his grandson, Gleb, whose skull we have found. The face is obliterated, but we can see the body. He is drawn at full height. Gleb Sviatoslavovich was known for his intelligence and piety. Surprisingly, his remains are not in Moscow, like the rest of the bones. It was actually sent to Moscow. We even have this worn-out cover from the parcel mailed to anthropologist Gerasimov. But he died by that time, and probably no one paid attention. Indeed, Moscow is written here. It is Gerasimov's address. All the traces lead to the laboratory of Mikhail Gerasimov. We know of 4 skulls sent there, and only this one was returned only because the anthropologist was dead. I have an impression that there was a conspiracy to take away princely remains from the territory of Ukraine, and this scheme failed after his death. It was saved by accident. We can probably say that. We are taking the skull for tests. We need a CT to recreate the face of the grandson of Yaroslav the Wise. But first, anthropologist Inna Potechina has to review the remains to confirm they belong to this particular prince. What can you say about these bones?
The skull is not big, rather slender, but at the same time has well-developed eyebrow arches and a nose bridge. I can say this man was 25-30 years old.
Inna Potechina finds the signs of the wound on the skull.
This is a trace from the chop wound.
This straight line?
Yes, the bone cracks go this way. It means he suffered the sword blow with the right hand, from behind and above. In this case, we will think he got the wound in the battle or skirmish during the conflict.
This is a horrible death. The blow from the back was powerful.
It damaged the brain. I think it was instant death.
With the tomography, we'll get a 3D model of the skull, and we'll see soon what this person looked like. Test results confirm the circumstances of the prince's death described in the chronicle. Pagans killed him. There is very little information about this prince. However, his life gave us an insight into the size of our country in 11th century. Khlib's dynasty of Chernihiv princes ruled the lands of Tmutarakan, the modern Taman Peninsula, in contemporary Russia. During his rule, the prince measured the length of the Kerch Strait, which divides our Crimea and Taman. Khlib carved a note about its size in stone. Traders and seafarers used this information, but even in his nightmares, Khlib couldn't imagine that 800 years later his inscription would be used for geopolitics. Russian Empress Catherine II used this stone to justify the capture of Crimea as Russian territory. Since then, Russian politics regarding Kyiv Rus hasn't changed. We could see that during the visit of Vladimir Putin to Paris, where he labeled Kiev Prince Yaroslav and his daughter Anna as Russian historical figures. Educated French audiences know about Russian Anna, Queen of France, the youngest daughter of our great Prince Yaroslav the Wise. She was the wife of Henry I and made a significant contribution to France's development. Today, powerful institutions and propaganda work to support the Russian president in promoting this idea. In 17th century, when there was no TV and internet, the Muscovy kingdom came up with another way to tell the world that they were the only descendants and heirs of Kyiv Rus. Historians Alexander Alferov and Miroslav Volodymr brought a copy of Tsar's Book of Titles, a collection of images of the Russian rulers ordered by the Muscovy Tsar Alexei Mikhailovich. The princes of the Kyiv Rus are added there, portrayed as Tsar's lookalikes. Muscovites presented these portraits to the foreign ambassadors as authentic pictures. They had to look like a benefactor. Gloomy faces, burdened by power. But they all were pictured based on the same characteristic prototype of a Tsar. Obviously, that was Alexei. They all look alike. So, this is where beards and gloomy features come from. Our princess sported mustache and maybe a short bristle, but they never belonged to bearded party, which appeared in the 17th century. Even today, 3 centuries after its creation, Tsar's Book of Titles continues fulfilling its ideological task. Almost all the pages about princes in Russian Wikipedia have these pictures. For our investigation, historians offer authentic images of the princes. We have seals of our princes from Kyiv Rus, Yaroslav the Wise, Izyaslav, Sviatoslav, Vsevolod, the seal of Volodymr Monomach. I can't believe it, honestly. I have never touched such things. The seal is like an amber piece, with an unchanged insect captured inside. These seals can bring us an impressive number of discoveries. Moreover, we believe that princes held these seals in their hands. They convey the energy of these people. You think these seals were in the hands of our princes? Sure. It's like today's business cards. Their titles and portraits are here. We can see our princes on these seals, and it's a depiction made in their times. How old is it? It is 960 years old. This is Yaroslav the Wise son, correct? Yes, this is seal of his son. Sviatoslav? Yes, the Prince of Chernihiv. It's an exceptionally clear, full-height portrait. He carries the symbol of his power and cross. When historians say that this is not a portrait, just an imagined picture, I'd rather say that this is imagined picture. This is historical trash, which false historians use. Finally, the face of Yaroslav's grandson is ready. That's what Gleb Sviatoslavovich could look like. In this reconstruction, he's about 30 years old. In the history of independent Ukraine, this is the first skull reconstruction of an alleged prince. It was performed by the experts of medical university named after Karol Marcinkovsky in Poland. We give the image to forensics, but this is only the first step. Our investigation aims to recreate the face of Yaroslav the Wise. For this, we need more images of his descendants. The third place on our investigation list is Pereyaslav. Today it's a small town. In the time of Kyivan Rus, it was one of the most important centers in the country. Similarly to Chernihiv, a big expedition from Russia led by archaeologist Mikhailo Kargar came here at the end of the 1940s. They looked for an ancient Rus church foundations and found several princely burials. I arranged a meeting with the local archaeologist Alexander Kobylenko to ask about the bones and where are they now. Here, he discovered the remains of the 5 Rus princes who died in Pereyaslav. The burials were located near this church. In this plan, we can see the burial chambers. What princes were buried here? Sviatoslav and Andrei the Kind, 2 sons of Volodymr Monomach, his grandson Rostislav Yuryevich, with his wife. I see. And there was no one in this sarcophagus. This is the sarcophagus of Andrei the Kind, after his bones were taken away. So they were taken away from here. Yes, they were taken away, and all these bones are not in Pereyaslav. Why would someone take it? Apparently, that was a widespread practice to conduct additional studies on anthropological materials. Were these studies conducted? Unfortunately, there were no publications or reports regarding the skeletons of these princes from Pereyaslav. I assume it didn't happen. It turns out Mikhail Kargar, who worked in the most medieval churches in Ukraine. He did expeditions to the main Rus towns Halich, Vyshgorod, Borispil, Volodymyr Volensky, and Kyiv. In the capital, Kargar worked in St. Sophia, St. Michael's Cathedral, and the Satinna Church, the 3 main holy places in Ukraine. He left behind empty tombs and no documents where the remains were taken. The way excavations were conducted shows that there was no research as such. The bones were just extracted and deported to Leningrad. We realized that in all places where we were looking for the remains of Yaroslav the Wise, the excavations were only done by Russian archaeologists. For the Ukrainian scholars, the Kyivan Rus era was off limits. Every person who studied Kyiv princes in Soviet times was instantly considered a bourgeois nationalist and would be persecuted. Scholars from Moscow and Leningrad didn't meet such obstacles. The last big expedition of the Ukrainian archaeologists was the dig near Dnipro-Hes. Here, the woman's father, Volodymr Grinchenko, found the swords of the Kyivan Rus period. After this, he, as well as other participants, was repressed. Svetlana and I went to the Restoration Center of the Ministry of Culture. We found out that the sword seized from smugglers, which Svetlana had seen in the news, was there. We agreed to meet with a conservationist, Viktor Holub, to determine if this sword could be one of the finds from the expedition to Dnipro.
My father had this photo in his album, the picture of the swords.
Could this sword be one of these? It is very similar. Type, proportions, decorations technique with silver inlays. The sword we have now in restoration is decorated with the same style. The holes are also similar. You can look with a microscope and see how exquisite this work is.
This is a very fine work.
We recently opened a Scandinavian decoration pattern on this sword. The swords in your photos also have similar decorations, but there are differences in details. The pattern is different. Do you think these are different swords? Yes, I can indeed say it is different, but it is very similar in production technology, and I can't even assume they are from the same workshop. Viktor Holub gives us a hint. We should ask for information about Dnipro swords in the archives of Ukrainian Scientific Academy. Here Ruslan finds materials about the expedition of Volodymr Hrynchenko. Drawings and sketches of weapons made in his hand. But the reports do not mention where the swords go. We want to check the historical museum in Dnipro. It is located not far from the excavations. Perhaps they transported the finds there. It is an 8-hour drive from Kyiv to Dnipro. It didn't even came to my mind to take Svetlana on this journey. She's over 80 and long travels are not easy at this age. But she insisted. She said there is nothing more important for her than the return of her father's history.
I want to hold them.
Your father had so many notes, and they were so detailed. I think he liked his work very much.
It was the work of his life. Mom was also involved in everything. She said, all our money went to diggers, the workers on excavation sites.
Did he hire them?
Of course, he hired them for his own money. He truly loved his job. When I graduated high school, I told my mother that I wanted to study at the historical department because my father had left unfinished work. I told her that I would continue his research, and she said, don't. One historian in the family was enough. She wouldn't let me, and that was it.
For the Ukrainian archaeologists, that was their country's history. They didn't want to give the artifacts away to Moscow or St. Petersburg to add a few more centuries to someone's empire. For that, they paid with their lives. During the excavations, Volodymr Hrynchenko found 1.5 kilos of gold and 4 kilos of silver. He handed over everything to the state because he believed that history should not be stolen. Finally, we arrived at the Dnipro Museum. The head of the archaeological department, Alexander Starik, meets us there.
Hi.
Hi, hello.
I have a photograph of 4 swords. What can you tell us about them?
Judging by their condition and appearance, we don't have any of these swords. But we have one rare sword here. We know it was found in 1928, and we know that your father found it. Museum workers say that Volodymr Hrynchenko found 5 swords, but the 5th was discovered later. This is why it wasn't in Svetlana's photos.
My God, I can't believe my father found this sword.
This is true. In our records, the year of the find is mentioned.
May I hold it?
Sure you can.
This is fantastic.
This sword is here so the whole collection should have gotten in the museum. Where are the other blades then? Unfortunately, we don't have more information. This is the only sword we have in our collection.
Could they be somewhere beyond Ukraine?
I think yes, but we'd have to search. In this museum we found that all the exhibits were evacuated eastward to Russia during World War II. One of the trains was bombarded near Kharkiv, and valuable exhibits were thrown a few kilometers around. Some were stolen and some were rescued and transported to the nearest museums. For us, it's a clue for further search. Our investigation to recreate the true face of Yaroslav the Wise continues. We went to Chernihiv, a second last stop in our search plan. So far we have only one reliable image of Yaroslav the Wise's grandson, but there is a big chance to find another princely burial. In the middle of the last century, the sarcophagus with the signs of princely burial was found in the city's vicinity. Surprisingly, a Ukrainian archaeologist was leading the excavations. This means that the materials were not taken to Moscow or Petersburg. In Chernihiv, I met historian Mykola Ilkiv to find out where are they now. Here's one of the stone slabs which covered the sarcophagus. In this case, we have many different signs of the 12th, 13th centuries on its surface. Triangles, a cross within a circle, and others. In this case, the most interesting symbols are so-called tudens. I see here, and here is another one. 1, 2, 3, and 4 tudens. This sign is very similar to our trident, slightly changed. Absolutely. It belongs to the group of heraldic signs in the Rurik dynasty. Recently, Ukrainian archaeologists find out that this sign was characteristic of the princess of Terebovlia, which was later incorporated into the Halych-Volhynia kingdom. We can presume that under this slab, in the sarcophagus, one of the sons of the Prince Vasilko of Terebovlia was buried, apparently Igor Ivan. And what was his relation to Yaroslav the Wise? Which generation was he? 3-4 generations as a minimum. Where are the remains from under the slab? I don't know this. The remains found during the excavations were studied by famous anthropologists. Do you know who they were? This was a famous Soviet anthropologist Velikanova who studied these remains. Where was she from? If I'm not mistaken, she was from Moscow. When we went to Chernihiv, I was sure we could find the remains of Yaroslav's descendants and get closer to the secret of his face. But all our hopes were in vain. As soon as it was known that a princely burial was found near Chernihiv, Moscow instantly sent its envoy. The remains disappeared. We examined 4 places, and everywhere the result was the same. Since the 19th century, Russian archaeologists have been opening all the burials of the Kyivan Rus princes. We didn't find a single document from this period that would mention where they took the remains of our rulers. It seems like they never existed. That is why we contacted the person with specific skills. Valery Hastinshikov, a former military intelligence officer. He's an expert in psyops, and he has access to vast classified archives. We gave him all the information we found in the excavation locations during this investigation, but we never expected what he would be able to find. First, when I started working in the archives, I thought it was an easy case. But further development was unbelievable. It was a ball of threads that I started untangling to the very end. Valery was able to follow the activities of the St. Volodymr's Brotherhood. They got the findings from the excavations in Volodymr Volhynsky, where we were looking for Prince Vasilkovich at the very beginning. This brotherhood had a patron in the Emperor's court in Petersburg. His name was Konstantin Konstantinovich. This was a very influential person. You have here that he was the president of the Emperor's Academy of Sciences. Yes, these were very influential people. Being in a top position, Konstantinovich was also a member of a specific organization, the Emperor's Orthodox Palestinian Society. By its statute, it helped Russian pilgrims to get to the Holy Land. But it also had another secret task. Emperor's Orthodox Palestinian Society was a secret society. Secret society, yes. The difference between a secret society from other organizations is that it has two layers. A core group consists of very close-knit people, close to power, and the outer circle serves as a cover. Sometimes people do not even know what they are doing. It was founded in 1882, when Russia was actively promoting the Russian world concept, trying to prove that all this territory belonged to the Russian Empire, and all the traditions, historical and cultural facts belonged to Russia. Surprisingly, this society found its place in Soviet history. You want to say that this society survived the revolution? Not only survived, but it also did very well. For example, the USSR Academy of Sciences has a separate department called Russian Palestinian Society, the same organization with a slightly changed name. How could that happen? We know from history that all the people and organization connected with the Tsar and monarchy were repressed or executed by the Bolshevik authorities after the revolution. Here lies the main question. The people who knew secrets important to authorities remained in power. Valery Hostinchikov believes that these secrets were related to the falsifications of history, the facts and discoveries which had to be covered. I want to show you two very interesting people. Boris Rybakov is one of them, and Mikhail Kargar is another. These are the people from our list. During the investigation, we followed the traces of their excavations. Boris Rybakov was the archaeologist who worked in Chernihiv, and Kargar worked in Pereyaslav. Rybakov and Kargar were directly connected with the Soviet Academy of Sciences. You might think, what was so strange about this? One works in Moscow, the other one in Leningrad. They are ordinary scholars in research institutes. There were thousands of them. But after these two outstanding people left Moscow or Leningrad and went to Ukraine, conducted excavations in our most important historical places, they returned and received the highest Soviet rewards, Stalin prizes. How can an ordinary archaeologist, even the most outstanding one, receive a Stalin prize for excavations in an insignificant place such as Ukraine? Rybakov and Kargar collaborated with another scholar, also received Stalin's prize, namely anthropologist Mikhail Gerasimov, the author of Yaroslav the Wise book. These people might be unaware that they have been part of a secret plan. This is Stalin. Do you think he had connections to this society? I didn't see his signature, that he was a secret society member. But based on my experience, I can say that all these organizations have very influential leaders who have access to people at the very top. What happened after the fall of the Soviet Union? As far as I understand, these organizations ceased existence. I'd like to believe this, but it is not so. You want to say that they still exist after 2 centuries. Nowadays, the head of this organization is a very famous person in Russia. General Stepashin used to work in top positions in the Federal Security Service. Stepashin was an FSB director, Minister of the Interior, and even Prime Minister of Russia. For 13 years he managed the most influential Russian institution, the Chamber of Accounts, which controls the money flow of all the state bodies. There is a curious phenomenon in Russia. When a classified organization, which belongs to the secret or military service, integrates with Russian Orthodox Church, another untransparent organization, This is Patriarch Kirill. Yes, this duo continues the idea of this society. And they still lead this organization today. They are the leaders indeed. This is a 2 centuries long cover-up you were able to discover. This is what I could find. But I believe there is much more, and this information could turn the world upside down. Perhaps the assumption voiced by Valery Khostinshikov are just a coincidence, and there is no conspiracy, but the facts we have found finally solve the mysterious disappearance of princely remains from Ukraine. We got access to the catalogs of the Research Institute of Anthropology of Moscow State University. It turns out that Moscow has the largest depository of bones. According to the list, they have 246 skulls from the Kyivan Rus epoch, taken out of 25 ancient Ukrainian cities and towns. For 111 years, Russia was extracting the remains from Ukraine. There were dozens of skulls, 15 from Pereyaslav, 32 from Kyiv, 16 from Vasiliev, and 42 from Chernihiv. Russia is a country that takes away things from others and then hides them in secret for a long time. We started sending official letters to Moscow asking to access to research the bones, but all our requests were denied. The last excuse was renovation works in the depository. When we realized we wouldn't get any access, we asked for an interview to discuss whose remains were there and if there were any princely remains. But Moscow scholars refused. I'm flying out to Moscow to try and get to the depository and arrange the study of the remains. The Anthropology Institute of the Moscow State University is in the center of the Russian capital, opposite the Kremlin, a few steps away from the new monument to Volodymr the Great. The old building hides behind the tall fence. I don't know what will be the outcome of my visit, so just in case I'm wearing a body camera. We're trying to enter the institute, but the guards do not let us go beyond the door. I have a young man from Ukraine here asking about some excavations. Asks for confirmation if we have got something. They send the request. The bosses here didn't expect us to come. No one is there. As much as we'd like to, we cannot get to this secure depository without permission. At last, we got to talk with the Institute's researcher. We've been negotiating with you since December. We did all you asked. You said to write this type of request. We did this. Then you said write a request to Sadovnichi. We did that. We keep receiving replies, but the reasons constantly change. Why can't we at least record an interview with you? We have either renovation works, celebrations, or something else happening all the time. We have an impression that you are just stonewalling us. We cannot understand the reason. Why are these remains so secret? She says that our requests were discussed many times in many meetings.
The position was that shooting these remains was unethical. Today is this moment.
But your scientific researchers work with these remains. Is it not unethical?
Yes, they do, but they don't make a film about these remains.
We won't get inside. I realized that they would never reveal the truth about whose remains they've been hiding there. The only burial of our prince which I can find in Moscow is in the Archangel Cathedral in the very heart of the Kremlin. The remains of Chernihiv Prince Mikhailo Vsevolodovich are kept here. We can only guess why the Chernihiv prince moved to Moscow. What made him spend the last days of his life here, and why didn't he return to his native Chernihiv? We have one historical fact. It was against his will, 350 years after his death. In the 16th century, the Moscow army captured Chernihiv for the first time. First thing they found the tomb of Prince Mikhailo and brought the remains to Moscow. Why him? Mihailo of Chernihiv is worshipped in our lands as a prince who paid his life for refusing to kneel before the Mongol Khan. Moscow Tsars needed our prince and his heroic story to prove it was their ancestor and distance themselves from their real past and close ties with Mongol Orda. The shrine with the relic of the Chernihiv prince stands surrounded by the tombs of Tsars. In this place, it seems the history of Kyiv Rus was chained to the history of Russia. In Moscow, I arranged an interview with Yevgeny Spitsin, a historian and author of 5 volumes about Russian history. I want to ask him why the remains from Ukraine are being hidden from us, and if it is possible to bring them home one day. Some remains were taken to Moscow indeed, but only to study them in Professor Gerasimov's laboratory. This famous anthropologist invented his well-known method to recreate the images of ancient people based on their bones, first of all, skulls. For example, we restored the portrait of Yaroslav the Wise. During the interview, Yevgeny Spitsin gave the impression of a calm person, but when I raised more and more facts about the disappeared bones, his mood changed. My God, why would you add any sacred sense here? But they are now in the Kremlin, Archangel Cathedral. Come on, they are not there. I know this cathedral. I am a native Muscovite. My ancestors have lived in Moscow since the 15th century. Russia cannot exist without the history of Kyiv Rus. And whom should we give this history to? I don't understand. This is our history. Whom should we give it to? I don't... When someone starts to agitate people with such stories about damn Moscows who captured our ancestors' bones, don't give them back, don't let recreate them, and so on. Those damn Moscows, damn bastards, to hell with them. And then everything is incited because of this. What's going to come out of this? Shall we shoot each other, blow up something, throw bombs? Perhaps this is why we know so much about Peter I, Ivan the Terrible, Alexander Nevsky, Catherine II, and other persons who don't have anything to do with Ukrainian history. And we almost don't know anything about those who built our state 1,000 years ago. History is a huge mosaic made of thousands of tiny pieces. When you put them together, you get a coherent picture. If some links are missing, there are gaps. You don't know the connections. You listen to someone else who tells the stories which have never happened in reality. We continue our investigation to find out what Yaroslav the Wise looked like. For this, we need the remains of another descendant. We have the last place to check. Lutsk was founded in the times of Kyiv Rus and is famous around the country because of the Lubart castle pictured on a 200 hryvnia banknote. But not many people know that there are underground remnants of an ancient church in the middle of the fortress. The excavations were conducted here at the end of the 1980s. I arranged a meeting with a deserved deputy director, archaeologist Viktor Bayuk, to find out more. Hi, Viktor. Hi. I was wondering about the excavations, which took place here 30 years ago. Information is scarce. Were there any burials? Indeed, a significant burial was found in the church of John the Revelator. Let's go there and I will tell you about it. Why are you interested in this burial? We're trying to find the remains of the relatives of Yaroslav the Wise to try and recreate his appearance. If the person from this burial was a prince, could we take samples from the tomb? Yes, we will go down to the church and try to take samples. We think that the burial belongs to the person from the prince's family. It's cold here. We're in the local sacred place. These are the remnants of the church of John the Revelator. It was built in Lutsk in the ancient period, in the 12th century. But I see you still have candles here. Sometimes church sermons are still served. It's an old place, but it's still a temple. You said it was the 12th century, so these walls are almost 1,000 years old. Yes, these are the original walls of the old Kyiv Rus times. They're almost 1,000 years old. We have the dome columns, altar, apse, and all the elements of the ancient temple. Where was the burial found? The burial was significantly located behind the altar. This is the authentic slab of the Kyivan Rus time, which covered the tomb of the deceased. And it was here for 1,000 years. Did you find any inscriptions? That would be very interesting to find. It would be a great discovery, especially if there were a princess tudent or trident. But unfortunately, there is nothing. Did anyone open the tomb in the last 30 years? No, I think we will be the first to try to do this. And we don't know if there are any bones at all. We can take a look. You see, I see only one bone there and nothing else. I think there is something there, but it's hard to see. It is dark and the tomb is quite deep. Let's try to move the smaller part of the gravestone. Maybe this would be enough to get inside. We realize that history is a thing of the past, but also a thing of today. These stones are pretty heavy. Do you feel the smell? Yes. Let's see. Look, there is one bone. True, there are not so many bones. Maybe in that corner. Look, there it is. Yes, there is a skull. I can tell from here this belonged to a male. It's rather big. I'll try to go down there. It's scary. I've never gone down to the tomb before. My colleagues went down there. It's usual for archaeologists. How do you feel? It's eerie. Careful. Can you take it? Sure. This study will answer an important question. Who was this person? What was his family? His tribe? See, the lower jaw is missing. Take a closer look. Perhaps it's somewhere near the skull. I see a few big bones, but nothing like a jaw. It's a unique thing. And great luck that this burial was preserved. In Soviet times, the tradition was to take away the most important finds, especially from the Kyivan Rus times, to Hermitage or some Russian museums. No doubt, it would be taken away. But in 1988, there were already active processes happening in the Soviet state. It was already falling apart. It couldn't exist anymore. People didn't have anything to eat, and the shops were empty. They couldn't care less about the prince at that time. In the reports from the 1980s, was there any description of the skeleton? Let's check it and see. Let's do this. The jaw is needed for the face reconstruction of this prince. Without it, it would be a difficult task. Are all the reports here? Yes. These are the journals of the Reserve Administration, and here is the report of 1988, when the burial was found. And you have the photos, yes, I see. Yes, we have photos from when the burial was opened, the gravestone which we have seen. See, all the bones are in place. The skull was fully preserved at that time. I see. This is the skull, fully preserved. And the most important, there's a lower jaw. Indeed, it's here. It is difficult to tell where the parts of the burial have gone. Our theory is that during the construction works, when the pavilion was built to cover the temple's foundations, perhaps the workers somehow damaged it or moved to another place. Who are these remains? I came to anthropologist Inna Potechina, who could help identify the skull. Archaeologists assume that this is the prince's skull. It was found in the princely burial, but we need to establish who this was.
I can tell that this is a big, massive skull. It has strong eyebrows.
Can we define his age?
We see that teeth are worn down, especially incisors and molars. From the inside, we can see that joints are closed. Basically, on these two features, I can say that he was 35-45 years old. Here is another interesting detail. Under the left papillary condyle, you can see a small hole. There is some discoloration of the bone from the metal oxide on the outside.
A dark stain.
Yes, from the size and form of this hole, we can assume that this was an entrance hole made by an arrow. The arrow probably wounded this person.
And this could be the cause of death.
I don't see traces of healing. It could be the cause of death because there are some critical vessels here.
Computer tomography will allow modeling the exact circumstances of this man's death. Also, we will be able to recreate his face and get closer to the main answer of our investigation. How did Yaroslav the Wise look? But first, we need to know the name of the prince from the Lutsk burial. All we have is his age and information about his wound. I came to Lviv to see history professor Sviatoslav Tersky. A few days ago, I asked him to look in the old sources for information about the burial in Lubard's castle. Good afternoon. Hi. Did you find out something? As of now, archaeological data lets us talk about the first half of the 13th century. We had some additional anthropological research, and we specify the information. A few days ago, we studied this skull with the anthropologist. I have the photo. See this spot? Our expert says that this is a narrow wound, perhaps fatal. The outline of the wound fits a quadrilateral armor-piercing arrow with deep penetration. What does this tell us? This is an important fact. It tells us that the deceased took part in combat. But we know that most of the rulers of the Lutsk appanage and their family members died naturally. The only significant conflicts they could participate in were a battle on Kalka and the battle against Batu Khan. During Batu Khan's campaign, Volhynia was devastated, so it was impossible to bury the prince with all the rituals. So we have only a battle on Kalka. Do we know who died in this battle? It was one of the sons of Ingvar Yaroslavovich. At the time, he was a lord of Lutsk. It may be his skull. What was his name? Yaroslav Ingvarovich. The information about this prince is scarce. We only know that Yaroslav Ingvarovich was one of the 4 sons of the Lutsk prince. He got his appanage in the small town of Dorogobush in Volhynia quite late. Every prince wanted a boy in his family. When there were few sons, it was a difficult challenge to find a land share for every one of them. But Yaroslav Ingvarovich ruled only 3 years. He got a message from Kyiv that the princes were getting together to fight the new enemy, the Mongol horde on the borders of Rus. The question to protect the land only had one answer. The war was an inherent part of life. The young prince put everything aside and joined the anti-Mongol coalition. The battle happened on the territory of today's Donetsk region. The Rus army was defeated due to poor coordination. Now, 800 years later, thanks to computer tomogram, we can recreate the circumstances of his death. The arrow entered a temporal bone from behind at an acute angle. Therefore, the victim was above the shooter, which can only mean one thing: they were retreating. If we imagine a chase, it would happen on the horse. The rider would bend over the horse back to reduce the air resistance. In this case, the back of the head would be open for a shoot, so the arrow could get there during the chase. The reconstruction of the face of Yaroslav Ingvarovich is ready. You will see now how this man looked. 800 years ago, he sacrificed his life for his land without a second thought. Now his history is back. We have two images of Yaroslav's descendants. The last stage of our investigation is to make a DNA analysis of the skull. This will allow us to solve the most significant historical dispute and answer the question who were Kyiv princes, of local or Scandinavian origin.
Well, we know for sure that our princes could be linked with the Scandinavian genetic line.
Together with anthropologist Inna Potechina, we take samples for DNA analysis in a special laboratory. For this test, it is best to take the tissue from a pars petrosa. No scholar in the last 200 years wasn't able to establish the origin of the dynasty of Kyiv princes. Inna realizes that we are close to one of the biggest scientific discoveries of the 21st century. She is extremely thorough in taking the samples. I'm flying to Denmark with the samples. We go to one of the world's best laboratories which specializes in testing of ancient DNA. Dr. Margaryan meets me. We go down to the underground storage of the Copenhagen University. Here they have the most extensive collection in the world of ancient human remains. We are in the basement of one of the university buildings. Here we have the repository of our skeleton collection. Wow, metal door. It looks like a secret vault. Yes, it is a large building, and we have many storage facilities. Here are the anthropological collections from the hundreds, thousands of skeletons from all over Denmark. Thousands of skeletons, yes, from different periods. In this section we store only Viking remains. Viking store? Imagine a few hundreds of the fierce warriors who terrified all the European countries are now fit in a few cardboard boxes. Each box contains one individual. We want to recreate the history of the Viking genome. Danish scholars made DNA analysis of the 100 of Vikings to find out the history of their origin, migration and dynastic ties. Perhaps somewhere in these boxes lies the ancestor of the princes whose remains we brought here. Of course, we know that Vikings settled on Ukrainian territory. It would be fantastic if we could research these remains. We passed the samples to Dr. Margaryan. We look forward to the discoveries that this project will bring. We may find out many unexpected things. The tests are being performed in the cutting-edge laboratory. You need to wear a special suit to get there, so the samples are not contaminated. This is a unique lab ideally equipped for the research of ancient DNA. We keep an optimal atmospheric pressure. The special ultraviolet rays are being used in the rooms. It minimizes environmental effects on our materials. DNA analysis of one sample costs 4,000 to 6,000 euros. The high price is due to the difficulty of getting the tissue's information, which is almost 1,000 years old. For our project, the Danish laboratory does everything for free. Scientists understand the importance of this investigation. Finally, the results are ready. We meet with Dr. Margaryan. He says he has fascinating outcomes. What did you find in our samples? We are looking at the preliminary test results. You said about an unexpected discovery. On this graph, every dot shows a person. For this research, we took Ukrainian, Russian, Norwegian and Italian populations and marked them with different colors. Our graph shows that the Lutsk sample is much closer to the Ukrainian and Russian populations than to the Norwegian. Similar situation is with sample from Chernihiv. It is also closer to the Ukrainian and Russian populations than the Scandinavian. This is an unexpected find because from the very beginning we thought that they were descendants of Vikings. So they weren't Vikings? Probably not. We haven't found Scandinavian components. This data should be a real scientific sensation. Test results show that collected samples from Chernihiv and Lutsk burials do not have Scandinavian components. But Dr. Margaryan doesn't hurry to the conclusions about the origin of the princely dynasty. He says he has even more sensational data. The Chernihiv sample belongs to the I2 haplogroup. It is widely spread on Ukrainian territory. The Lutsk sample belongs to a different haplogroup, R1A1, which is spread all over Europe. Different haplogroups show that their paternal lines are not related. They are not directly related. Knowing this, we are now in a difficult situation. If both samples had the same haplogroup, this would mean they have one common ancestor, and Yaroslav the Wise could be this person. But the results show that people from Lutsk and Chernihiv graves have different ancestors. There are several options about the belongings of these remains. These people could be high-positioned nobles outside the princely family, because they were buried in prestigious places and expensive sarcophaguses.
It happened very often that the remains were reburied. Someone could take out the remains of the originally buried person and put someone else. Identification on the skeletons of princes or other historical figures remains problematic.
Another possible theory is that people we have found are related to the princely dynasty and ruled our land. Their ancestors could be different because of adultery. There were many bastard princes who could have different mothers or fathers. There are cases where women gave birth out of wedlock. The DNA test results give many other options for speculations. Who are those people we have found in the tombs? The only thing we can't say for sure is if they were related to Yaroslav the Wise. What do we do now with the recreation of Yaroslav the Wise's image? I think we're in dead end. We cannot use these two portraits. We decided to change the strategy of our investigation. Let's turn to studies of art and history. But for this portrait, we miss one detail: the description of the appearance of the closest relatives of Yaroslav the Wise. There is only one place to find this information: the secret archives of the Vatican. I am flying to Italy to get to one of the most extensive archives in the world. On the main Vatican Square, Reverend Porphyry waits for me. Nice to meet you here on St. Peter's Square. He has studied the documents in this archive for 25 years and promises to take us inside. We can only imagine the secrets of humankind hidden in the heart of the apostolic capital. This archive contains documents as old as 6th century. It is not well researched by Ukrainian historians, yet there was a constant flow of information to this place throughout centuries from all over the world, including Ukraine. Our task is to find the documents from the times of Yaroslav the Wise. The buildings of this archive are the most protected in the world. To get inside, we need to pass through several security posts. Researchers who want to work with the old manuscripts have a particular room at their disposal, but this small room doesn't reflect the scale of this place. The primary collection is being kept underground, and outsiders are not allowed. The length of the shelves with the documents is almost 85 kilometers. The book was brought to us from this repository. An old manuscript contains the letters between Pope Gregory VII and foreign rulers. He addressed one of the letters to the son of Yaroslav the Wise, Prince Izaslav.
Regi ruscorum et regine uxore ei salutem et apostolicam benedictionem.
What does that mean? To the king of Ruthenians and his wife, my greetings and the apostolic blessing. The Pope of Rome calls Izaslav a king of Kyivan Rus. Yes, the king of Kyivan Rus. He doesn't even call the Polish ruler a king, but a duke. Here we have Rex. Kyivan Rus rulers had the title of the king. None of the known chronicles mentions that. Today this small detail helps to understand where our roots are. Ukrainian lands were always in close contact with Europe. Unfortunately, this document doesn't describe the prince's appearance. Reverend Porphyry tells about an ancient manuscript that is being kept in the north of Italy and contains reliable images of Yaroslav the Wise. There are several very clear images. I advise you to go there, see them, and present them in Ukraine. Not many people know about the small town of Chernihiv at the foot of the Alps, but it has an ancient history and was founded in the times of Julius Caesar. I met the local historian Francesca Zago to understand whose images are in the manuscript and if they can help with our investigation.
The Code of Gertruda is a unique book. It is a collection of prayers. 1,000 years ago it was given as a present to the Polish princess Gertruda, who married the son of Yaroslav the Wise. She put the pictures of her children there, the grandchildren of Yaroslav. Later the book changed hands until it ended up in the local monastery.
Today, this prayer book belongs to UNESCO World Heritage. It is kept in the Archaeological Museum of Chernihiv. We are one step away from detail which might help us recreate the face of Yaroslav the Wise. This is a credible image of his grandson. We meet Enzo Di Franceschi, an expert in medieval illustrations. Italian scholars are happy that the history of this book and its pictures will return to Ukraine. Look at the decoration of the pages. This is gold and purple. There was no equal to that book in beauty and value in those days. This prayer book was a luxury. Every detail has some sense behind it. For example, gold symbolizes sanctity, and purple is a symbol of power. When the light shines on the miniature, the gilded spots add volume to the image. You don't find this anywhere else.
And now, look at the picture of Yaroslav's grandson. It is a beautiful portrait of Yaropolk. He holds his hands out to Apostle Peter in prayer. The prince is young in this picture. He hardly has a beard.
I have never seen something so amazing. Yaropolk, the grandson of Yaroslav the Wise, a favorite son of Gertrude. His portrait is photographically accurate.
If we turn the page to look carefully, this portrait is slightly different. Here he is older, his hair and mustache are darker, and his face looks older.
Can we say that people on these miniatures have natural features unlike the old icons? The differences between the young and older images of the same person clearly show the signs of naturalism. Our investigation almost failed, but the find in Chernihiv changed everything. This miniature from the prayer book is most precise picture of the Kyivan Rus prince out of all existing images. According to forensics, grandchildren bear the most resemblance to their grandparents. This increases our chances to get a reliable image of Yaroslav the Wise. In her 80s, Svetlana Hrinchenko coped with a 1,000-kilometers journey for one thing. She wanted to bring back the history of her father and his archaeological discoveries, swords from Dnieper. We go to Kharkiv to check the story about the train with the museum artifacts bombarded in this area. If they were rescued, the swords could end up in the Kharkiv Historical Museum. This is our only clue.
I have only one letter from him. I am impressed and delighted that I have at least these moments reflecting his time.
Did he never write, or were the letters never delivered?
No one wrote anything to anyone in those times. He was very sick when he returned from imprisonment. He had heart disease. I was in the summer camp then, so I never saw him again. He went to Poltava urgently, and soon he died there in the hospital.
Do you often go to his grave?
This is a painful question. Very painful. I don't know where his grave is. It is my burden, and all my life it pains me, always. I would like to find his grave, but I couldn't. I couldn't. If I could find his grave, it would have lightened my heart.
She never saw him, and still she loves him so much, as if they had lived together all their life. I realized that the swords she's looking for are not just archaeological finds. They make her father real to her. That is why this is so important. We came to the Kharkiv Historical Museum, and we were disappointed the minute we entered the door. The museum doesn't know the provenance of the exhibits from the pre-war times. All the documentation was lost. But we have archive photos, exact sizes, and sketches made by Svetlana's father. She doesn't want to go until she checks all the exhibits.
Maybe this is the element of this sword.
Let's count the dots.
Look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Exactly.
Remember, in the Restoration Center, they told us that there are no two identical swords. If this part is here, it can prove the theory about the bombing on the train.
This is the upper part of this sword. Unbelievable. It's a miracle.
This is an element of the first sword from the photograph. In the next showcase, we noticed a blade very similar to the second sword from Hrinchenko collection. Museum workers do not believe this is the same artifact. They took out the exhibit so we could check it. See, there's a small notch that is not here. Expert checks the sword centimeter after centimeter, every letter of the Latin inscription on the blade, and his doubts disappear. Well, quite possibly, it is the same sword.
My father found this sword. It is the most valuable artifact for me. Did you see how we found the handle?
Where did you find it? In Dnipro? No, in your museum.
This handle is in your museum.
Where?
Near the broken sword. And this detail is beside it. Take a look. My heart rejoiced that we'd found 3 swords.
Yes.
Right?
Out of 5.
3 out of 5, not bad. This will be his memorial.
At the same time, our team was trying to find Svetlana's father. We found him in Poltava.
So maybe... Akim.
We didn't tell Svetlana about this, but the letters home were in her father's case folder. For 80 years, the family thought that he wasn't writing home, but he did. The wards confiscated his letters and never sent them. This letter was never sent to your mother.
To Maronets Maria Sergeyevna.
Dear Marusia, I'm alive and well. I'm being transferred to Kansk in Krasnoyarsk territory. I suffer that I didn't see you. I know you waited for me. I can't write much. I know you're worried about me. I know you'd never believe that I'm guilty. So far, I'm cutting forest. Please live and take care of yourself and children. I'm happy that I have you. You all my life and my lighthouse. I will endure everything for you. Please don't forget me. This place is called Monastery Road. There's a big monastery on the hill and one of the oldest cemeteries in Poltava. We tried to find your father's grave for a long time. Unfortunately, no documents survived. Not in the archive, nowhere.
I know. There is probably not even a trace.
The only thing we found is that he's buried here.
Is it here?
Yes, that's the place. Half of these graves don't have any names on them.
I can imagine. A grave forgotten by everyone.
Yes.
But this is his place, and I bow down to my father. Eternal memory to him. And may he rest in peace. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. The case which waited on Svetlana Grinchenko for decades is closed. She returned the story of her father to the family and returned her father to the history of our country. In our lab, the true discovery is finally ready. We will now see the face of the most outstanding person in our history. For 80 years, the image of the Yaroslav the Wise was an effective weapon for imposing foreign history and depriving our own. To bring it back and return the real face of the prince, we had to walk a long way in Ukraine, Russia, Italy and Denmark. We engaged more than 30 scholars from different fields. The investigation took a year and a half, but we reached our goal. I want to see him finally. So let's see our work. Let's see. Great. This is fantastic. Yes, the prince looks alive and absolutely real, as if he just returned from the battle. Unexpected recreation. In the old version, he had a wedge-shaped nose, he was burdened with life and had many wrinkles. You did a great job with this one. We tried to make him real. I think it's essential that last year we tried to see and recreate the face of his wife in her head. Now we have this image of Yaroslav the Wise. Millions of Ukrainians can get closer to history and feel closer to these people. I think this makes us one step closer to better understanding of our past. This investigation showed how little we know about our country's past, about the heroes whose blood ran in our veins, and even about our own families. Many chronicles and historical artifacts were taken away to Russia, which has been rewriting our history for several centuries. But this is not the only reason we don't know our past. It is also us and our reluctance to learn more. Sometimes one photograph from the family album can reveal a life-changing story. You have to just open the album. A few unknown museum exhibits can tell more than any textbook if you know where they are from. There are thousands of unique artifacts in Ukraine that carry our country's code and give us a chance to understand better who we are.
Learning the history of our people, knowing our ancestors, our people, and our elites is crucial for our self-identification.
Take any Western country, for example, where children from a young age go to the museum and learn their history, know their kings better than any Ukrainian pupil.
Today we have a chance to make a history of our state, connecting it to the deep historical roots of Kyivan Rus, the state which is over 1,000 years old.
Now is the best time to finally start writing our history by ourselves.